The scalpel moved faster than anyone in the OR had ever seen. The patient's heart had stopped twice already, and the attending surgeon had stepped back, shaking his head, defeat written across his face. Blood pooled in the surgical field, the monitors screaming their warnings into the sterile air. The anesthesiologist called out the dropping blood pressure, her voice tight with panic. But the resident in the corner, the one nobody knew, the one they called Ghost, stepped forward without hesitation. Her hands moved with a precision that seemed impossible. Steady as stone, even as chaos erupted around her. In 40 seconds, she did what 3 experienced surgeons couldn't. Her fingers found the bleeder, tied it off, and stabilized the torn vessels with movements so fluid they looked rehearsed. The monitors beeped back to life, steady and strong. The chief of surgery, Dr. Marcus Hale, had been watching from the observation deck above. He leaned forward, his hands pressed against the glass, and asked the question that would change everything. "Who is that?" The scrub nurses exchanged uncertain glances. One of them finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just a resident, sir. She's been here about 3 months." Dr. Hale's eyes narrowed as he watched the woman below strip off her gloves with mechanical efficiency. She didn't celebrate. She didn't even look at the patient she'd just saved. She simply nodded once to the attending, who stood frozen in shock, and walked toward the OR doors. "What's her name?" Dr. Hale demanded. The nurse checked her tablet. "Mitchell, Dr. Sarah Mitchell." He watched her disappear through the doors, and something in his gut told him that name was going to become very important. 3 months ago, I walked through the front doors of St. Catherine's Hospital with everything I owned in a single duffel bag. My name is Sarah Mitchell. At least that's what my paperwork says now. That's the name I gave them when I applied for the residency position. It's not exactly a lie, but it's not exactly the truth either. The truth is complicated. And complicated is dangerous, so I keep it simple. Keep my head down, do my work, don't make friends, don't ask questions, and sure as hell don't let anyone ask me questions. The residency coordinator had looked at my application with barely concealed skepticism. My resume was thin, graduation from a mid-tier medical school, no research publications, no letters of recommendation from prestigious mentors, just the bare minimum. "We don't usually accept residents with your profile," she'd said. I'd sat across from her in that cramped office, hands folded in my lap, and said nothing. Sometimes silence is the best answer. After a long moment, she sighed and clicked, "Approve." "You'll start Monday. Don't make me regret this." I didn't thank her. I just nodded and left. My first day was exactly what I expected. A blur of orientations, paperwork, and suspicious looks from the other residents. They were younger than me, most fresh out of medical school, eager and ambitious. They travelled in packs, comparing scores and sharing stories. I stayed on the periphery, invisible. That's where I needed to be. During the welcome speech, Dr. Marcus Hale stood at the front of the auditorium. "In this hospital," he said, his eyes scanning the room, "you will earn respect through skill, dedication, and humility. You will be tested every single day." When his gaze landed on me, it lingered just a fraction too long. I looked down at my hands and waited for the moment to pass. That night, I unpacked in the tiny on-call room they'd assigned me. The room was barely large enough for a bed and a locker. I'd slept in worse places. I pulled out my few belongings, 3 pairs of scrubs, a change of clothes, a toothbrush, and a small wooden box wrapped in cloth. I set the box on the narrow shelf and stared at it for a long moment. I hadn't opened it in 2 years. I wasn't going to start now. There was also a photograph, face down in the bottom of the bag. I left it there. Some things are better left buried. The first few weeks passed in a haze of exhaustion and routine. I volunteered for every shift nobody else wanted. The overnight traumas, the post-op monitoring, the cases where the patient was already circling the drain. The other residents started avoiding me, not out of malice, but discomfort. I didn't fit in. I didn't laugh at their jokes or join them for coffee. I was a ghost, and they treated me like one. That was fine. I preferred it that way. But Dr. Hale noticed. I could feel his attention like a weight on my shoulders. He watched me during morning rounds, watched me in the OR, watched me in the hallways when he thought I wasn't paying attention. One evening, about 6 weeks into my residency, I was in the skills lab practicing sutures when Dr. Hale walked in. The lab was supposed to be empty at that hour. I froze when I heard the door open. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there watching me work. Finally, he spoke. "You have excellent technique. Where did you train?" I kept my eyes on the suture pad. "Medical school, same as everyone else." "Which school? Does it matter?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. He was quiet for a moment. "I suppose not, but I'm curious. You operate with a confidence that most residents don't develop until their 3rd or 4th year. It's unusual." I tied off the suture and set down the needle driver. I had good teachers. He nodded slowly, but I could tell he didn't believe me. "Well, keep up the good work, Dr. Mitchell." He left, and I sat there in the empty lab, my hands finally starting to tremble. I knew then that I was on borrowed time. Dr. Hale was smart and he was suspicious. It was only a matter of time before he started digging. And if he dug deep enough, he'd find things I couldn't afford for anyone to find. That night, it started like any other. I was on trauma call, standing in the ER with terrible coffee, waiting for the inevitable chaos. It came at 11:47 p.m. 32-year-old male, car accident, high-speed collision, multiple traumas. The paramedics wheeled him in, his face pale, his breathing shallow, blood soaking through the bandages. Dr. Patel was the attending on call. He took charge immediately, barking orders. I stood back, waiting for my assignment. The patient crashed within minutes. His blood pressure plummeted, and the monitor started screaming. Dr. Patel called for blood, for fluids, for every intervention in the book, but nothing was working. I could see it in his face. The moment confidence drained away and panic took over. "We need to open him up," I said. Dr. Patel shot me a look. "We don't have time to get him to the OR. Then we do it here." He hesitated, and in that hesitation the patient's heart stopped. The monitor flatlined. The room erupted into controlled chaos. Chest compressions, epinephrine, the crash cart rolling in. They got him back once, then he crashed again. Dr. Patel froze. I saw it happen. The exact moment he gave up. That's when I moved. I didn't ask permission. I didn't wait for orders. I just stepped forward, grabbed the scalpel, and made the incision. My hands moved on pure instinct, muscle memory taking over. I found the bleeders, clamped them, tied them off. I stabilized the torn vessels and packed the wound. 40 seconds, that's all it took. The monitors beeped back to life. The room went silent. Everyone was staring at me. The nurses, the residents, Dr. Patel. I looked up and saw Dr. Hale standing in the doorway, his face unreadable. Our eyes met. And I knew that my quiet, invisible life here was over. I stripped off my gloves and walked out without a word. The next morning, I was summoned to Dr. Hale's office. The message came through my pager at 7 a.m. Report to Chief of Surgery immediately. I stood outside his office door for a full 2 minutes, my hand hovering over the handle, every instinct screaming at me to run. But something stopped me. Maybe pride, maybe exhaustion, maybe I was just tired of running. I knocked. "Come in." The office was exactly what I expected. Walls lined with diplomas, shelves filled with medical journals, a large desk covered in paperwork. Dr. Hale sat behind that desk, his fingers steepled, his eyes fixed on me. "Sit," he said. I sat. He didn't speak right away. Just watched me, studying my face like I was a puzzle. Finally, he leaned forward. "Last night, you performed an emergency thoracotomy in the trauma bay. You made decisions that most surgeons with 20 years of experience would hesitate to make. You executed a procedure that requires not just skill, but experience. Real, hands-on, life or death experience." He paused. "Where did you learn to do that?" I kept my face carefully neutral. "Medical school residency training, same as everyone else." His eyes narrowed. "Your file says you graduated from a mid-tier program 2 years ago. No honors, no research, no surgical fellowships, no trauma rotations at major centers. Yet you operate like someone who's seen 1,000 traumas, like someone who's worked in a war zone." My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't let it show. "I don't know what you want me to say, Dr. Hale." "I want you to tell me the truth," he said, his voice hard. "Who are you really, Dr. Mitchell?" The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating, but I held his gaze and said nothing. After a long moment, he sighed and leaned back. "I don't know what you're hiding, but I will find out. I have resources, I have connections, and I don't like mysteries in my hospital." He dismissed me with a wave. I was almost out when his voice stopped me cold. "One more thing. We have a VIP patient arriving tonight. Senator Richard Dalton, acute abdominal pain, possible surgical intervention required. The press will be watching. The hospital's reputation is on the line." He looked at me. "I want you on the surgical team." I should have said no, should have walked out and never looked back. But instead, I heard myself say, "I'll be there." Senator Richard Dalton arrived at St. Catherine's at 9:13 p.m. in a convoy of 3 black SUVs. I watched from the third-floor window as security personnel swept the entrance, as hospital administrators rushed around, as media vans began to gather outside. This wasn't just a patient, this was a political event. I scrubbed in at 9:45 p.m. alongside Dr. Patel and 2 other attending surgeons. The OR had been cleared of all non-essential personnel. Armed security stood outside the doors. Dr. Patel made the first incision at 10:02 p.m. Standard appendectomy, clean and controlled. But the moment he opened the abdominal cavity, everything changed. "Jesus," Dr. Patel whispered. It wasn't a ruptured appendix. It was a perforated bowel, septic, with infection spreading through the abdominal cavity like wildfire. Dr. Patel's hands faltered. "We need to call in a specialist." "There's no time," I said. "If we don't control this now, he'll go into septic shock. He'll die on this table." Dr. Patel looked at me, and I saw the decision forming in his eyes. He was going to let me take over. "Do it," he said quietly, moving aside. I stepped into position, and my hands went to work. Debride the necrotic tissue, irrigate the cavity, resect the damaged section of bowel, create a temporary ostomy. My movements were automatic, precise, born from years of experience that nobody in this room knew I had. The OR was silent except for the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the sound of my own breathing. And then from somewhere beyond the surgical drape, I heard a voice, weak, barely a whisper, slurred from anesthesia, but unmistakable. "I know you." My hands froze. Slowly, I looked up at the senator's face. His eyes were half open, clouded and unfocused, but they were looking directly at me. "Afghanistan," he whispered. "You were there. You saved my son." The room spun. No, this couldn't be happening. Dr. Patel's voice cut through the fog. "Dr. Mitchell, what is he talking about?" I couldn't answer. I couldn't breathe. Because if Senator Dalton remembered me, if he remembered what I'd done in that field hospital 3 years ago, then everything I'd run from was about to catch up. And there was nowhere left to hide. I finished the surgery in complete silence. The senator would survive, but would I? I made it to the locker room before my legs gave out. I sat on the cold metal bench, head in my hands, trying to control my breathing. Afghanistan. 3 years ago. I'd been Captain Sarah Mitchell, MD, United States Army, attached to a forward operating base in Kandahar province. I was a trauma surgeon operating in a field hospital under constant threat of rocket attacks. Lieutenant James Dalton had been brought in on a stretcher, his uniform soaked in blood, his chest torn open by shrapnel. Sucking chest wound, severed femoral artery, multiple fractures. He was dying. The base was under orders to evacuate. Enemy forces were closing in. Command had given us 20 minutes to pack up and move, but I couldn't leave him. I wouldn't. I'd operated on that kid for 2 hours while mortars fell around us, while my commanding officer screamed at me to abandon the patient and get on the helicopter. I'd saved Lieutenant Dalton's life, and I'd been court-martialed for it. The door opened. I looked up and saw Dr. Hale standing there. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood a woman in a dark suit. FBI, I could tell. "We need to talk," Dr. Hale said quietly. "Not here," the woman added. "Not somewhere private." I stood, slowly. "Am I under arrest?" The woman's expression didn't change. "That depends on what you tell us, Captain Mitchell." The use of my rank hit me like a physical blow. They knew everything. We reached Dr. Hale's office and the woman closed the door. She pulled out a badge. "FBI Special Agent Rebecca Torres. Sit down, Captain." I sat. Agent Torres opened a tablet and turned it toward me. On the screen was my military service record. Captain Sarah Mitchell, trauma surgeon, decorated for valor, court-martialed for disobeying direct orders, dishonorably discharged. "You were one of the best combat surgeons in the military," Agent Torres said. "You saved hundreds of lives, and then you threw it all away to save one lieutenant against direct orders." She paused. "Why?" I looked at the screen, at the photo of myself in uniform, and felt something break inside me. "Because he was 19 years old," I said quietly. "Because he had a family waiting for him. Because leaving him to die would have been murder, orders or no orders." Agent Torres studied me for a long moment. "Senator Dalton has been looking for you for 3 years. After you were discharged, you disappeared, changed your name, erased your records, started over. He wants to thank you." I laughed bitterly. "Thank me? I lost everything because of that decision. My career, my reputation, my entire life." "And you'd do it again, wouldn't you?" Dr. Hale said softly. I met his eyes. "Yes, every single time." Before anyone could respond, the hospital's emergency alarm blared to life. Mass casualty event. All available surgical staff report to the emergency department immediately. Agent Torres's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and her face went pale. Chemical plant explosion 15 miles from here. Estimated 40 to 60 casualties. Incoming. Dr. Hale was already moving toward the door. He looked back at me. How many mass casualty events have you handled, Captain? More than anyone in this building, I said. He nodded once. Then let's go. We'll deal with the rest later. The emergency department was descending into controlled chaos. Dr. Hale immediately took command. Listen up. We have multiple critical patients incoming. Chemical burns, blast injuries, respiratory distress. I want trauma teams in bays 1 through 6. Move. I grabbed gloves and headed toward Trauma Bay 1, but Dr. Hale's hand on my shoulder stopped me. Not there, he said. You're with me. We're taking the worst cases. He led me to the main trauma bay. You've done this before, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, sir. Then I need you to forget you're a resident. I need you to be the surgeon you were trained to be. Can you do that? I looked at him. And for the first time since I'd arrived at St. Catherine's, I didn't hide. I didn't pretend. Yes, sir, I can do that. The first ambulance arrived 3 minutes later. Hours blurred together. I lost count of how many patients I treated, how many lives I saved, how many times I made split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death. At some point, I looked up and saw the other residents watching me, their faces a mixture of shock and respect. I wasn't Ghost anymore, I was something else entirely. Around 3 a.m., the flow of patients finally slowed. I stood in the middle of the trauma bay, my scrubs soaked with blood and chemicals. Dr. Hale approached me. 37 patients, he said quietly. 0 deaths. That's because of you. I shook my head. That's because of all of us. No, he said firmly. That's because we had a combat surgeon leading triage. Before I could respond, Agent Torres appeared. Senator Dalton is awake. He's asking for you. Senator Dalton's room was on the VIP floor. When he saw me, his eyes filled with tears. Captain Mitchell, he said, I've been looking for you for 3 years. I stood, frozen in the doorway. My son is alive because of you, he interrupted. James is alive, married, with a daughter now. He's a teacher. He has a life. And he wouldn't have any of that if you hadn't refused to leave him behind. The words hit me like a punch. I lost everything for that decision, I said quietly. I know, he said, and that's why I've spent 3 years trying to find you, to fix it. He handed me a folder. Inside were official documents, military records, legal papers. I've been working with the Judge Advocate General's office, Senator Dalton explained. Your court-martial was reviewed. The dishonorable discharge has been overturned. You've been granted an honorable discharge with full benefits and back pay. I stared at the papers, unable to process what I was reading. I don't understand. You were punished for doing the right thing, he said. For saving a life when everyone else was ready to write it off. That's not a crime. That's heroism. And I made it my mission to ensure the military recognized that. Tears blurred my vision. Why? Because my son gets to watch his daughter grow up, Senator Dalton said simply. Because you gave our family a future, and because what they did to you was wrong. Agent Torres spoke up. There's more. The senator has also been in contact with the medical board. Your medical license, which was suspended after your discharge, has been fully reinstated. You're no longer a resident, Captain. You're a fully licensed trauma surgeon. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. 3 years of running, of hiding, of pretending to be someone I wasn't. And in one night, it was all over. I don't know what to say, I finally managed. Say you'll stop hiding, Senator Dalton said. Say you'll go back to being the surgeon you were meant to be. This hospital needs you. This country needs you. I looked down at the papers in my hands, at the official seals and signatures that gave me back my identity, my career, my life. I'll think about it, I said quietly. The senator smiled. That's all I ask. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of the surgical staff during morning rounds, no longer wearing resident scrubs, but the white coat of an attending physician. Dr. Hale had made the announcement the day before. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, formerly Captain Mitchell of the U.S. Army Medical Corps, was joining the staff as the new Director of Trauma Services. No. Now I stood before them, preparing to present my plan for overhauling the trauma department. Good morning, I began. For those who don't know me, my name is Dr. Sarah Mitchell. Before I came to St. Catherine's, I spent 6 years as a combat trauma surgeon in Afghanistan and Iraq. I've operated in field hospitals under rocket fire, treated mass casualties with limited resources, and made life or death decisions in situations most of you will never face. I paused. I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm telling you this because trauma medicine is war. It's chaos. And if we're going to save lives, we need to be prepared for that chaos. 3 months later, I stood in the same conference room where I'd first presented my trauma protocol. But this time, I wasn't alone. The room was filled with surgical staff, residents, nurses, paramedics, everyone who'd been part of the new program. Dr. Hale stood at the front. I want to thank all of you for your hard work over the past 3 months. Our trauma outcomes have improved by 40%. Our response times have been cut in half, and we've successfully handled 3 mass casualty events without a single preventable death. He paused. This is because of Dr. Mitchell's leadership and your dedication. Applause filled the room. Dr. Mitchell, would you like to say a few words? I stood and looked out at the faces of the people I'd worked alongside. When I came to this hospital, I was running from my past, I said quietly. I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. But you all showed me something I'd forgotten. That medicine isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, doing the work, and never giving up on the people who need us. My voice grew stronger. Every single person in this room has saved lives. You've made impossible decisions. You've worked through exhaustion and doubt and fear. And you've done it because you believe in something bigger than yourselves. I looked at Dr. Hale. Thank you for giving me the chance to remember that. Thank you for believing in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. As the meeting ended, James Dalton appeared in the doorway. He was wearing civilian clothes, a backpack slung over his shoulder, smiling. Hey, he said. Hey yourself, I replied. What are you doing here? I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd see if you wanted to grab dinner. I glanced at my watch. I'd love that. We walked out of the hospital together, and as we stepped into the evening air, I realized something. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I wasn't waiting for the past to catch up with me. I was just living. You look happy, James observed. I am, I said, and I meant it. We walked down the street, talking about nothing and everything. Two people who'd been through hell and somehow found their way back. And as the city lights began to flicker on around us, I thought about the question Dr. Hale had asked me that first night. Who are you really, Dr. Mitchell? Now I finally had an answer. I was a surgeon, a healer, a fighter, someone who'd lost everything and found it again, someone who'd been broken and put herself back together. Someone who'd learned that the hardest battles aren't fought on battlefields or in operating rooms. They're fought inside ourselves every single day when we choose to keep going despite the pain. I was Captain Sarah Mitchell, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, and I was exactly where I was meant to be. Finally, after all this time, I was home.